Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking about Microsoft Flow today with our very own Alan Wine. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention a couple things. First, we do record this webinar along with all of our other webinars. So if you want to watch it again, if you want somebody else in your organization to be able to see it, just go on over to our website and it'll be up by this afternoon. Our website, of course, is enovia.com. Also, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into that question box. We will get them called out and answered for you. So without further ado, Alan, I turn it right over to you.
Thanks, Abby. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. Microsoft has come up with some innovative products over the years for helping with automation. This one is relatively new. It's just out this year for all practical purposes, but I found it to be a really interesting tool for non-programmers, for people to help them along the way with connecting to different devices and databases and sources of information. So what we're going to do is talk about Flow today. I'm just going to give you an overview. We're not going to go into high detail on this. I'm going to talk briefly about how it can be used in your business. And my hope is that through the demo, and they'll be relatively simple demos, that you'll be able to see how this can get done, how easy it is to use, and from that, you'll be able to start building some simple flows for yourself, and then really kind of let your imagination run wild along those lines. So through the morning, we're going to talk about what flow really is. We're going to talk about how you build flows. Then we'll do a demo, and I've got about 5 flows that I'm going to walk you through, and then we'll save time at the end for questions. So when I started working with this program, it reminded me of a time many, many years ago when I was working with my son's teacher in 6th grade. And, I was a programmer at that point, and there was this new thing out on the market from Legos called Mindstorms. And for those of you that don't know what Mindstorms is, it's still out today. You get a little programmable box, and then you can attach devices to it. So you can attach wheels to it, engines. You can build arms that go up and down on it. They had a lot of sensors that you could put on it, so you could have light sensors, you could have heat sensors. And the idea was kids would build these robots, and then the robots would do certain tasks that you would lay out on a table. And things along the lines of following a black line, rolling a certain amount of distance and then stopping, going a certain speed, picking up balls and putting them over into another area of the table. What you would think would be fairly complex things. And we have to program the robots to do this. Well, when he asked me to do this, I'm thinking, you have no clue what you're asking for. Because programming is a language. And like learning any language, you have to understand the words, the syntax, the grammar. And these are 5th and 6th graders. How in the world am I going to teach them a language? And quite frankly, we had to do it in about a 3-month window, 2 nights a week. So, at first I'm like, Gary, this isn't going to work. And he said, take the unit home and let me know. So I took it home thinking this was going to be a disaster. And to my surprise, and again, this was more than 20 years ago, Lego had stepped back and thought the same thing that I thought, which is you can't really teach 6th graders quickly how to do a new language. But if we represent all of those commands graphically and then just let them attach these blocks together and put in certain pieces of information, they can do that. And so what Lego did is, if you think about what Legos are little blocks that you put together and make something cool out of it. They did that on the programming side. And they said, all right, I'm going to build a block that's for engine. And inside that block, if I bring it up on the screen, it would be speed, time, how long do I want the engine to run, how fast do I want it to run, and direction, forwards or backwards. Do I want the engine to run forwards, do I want it to run backwards? And they did that with all kinds of different little pieces. The same with the light sensor. Turn the light sensor off, turn it on. What do I do? Send a command when I see a change from white to black. And they built all these little objects, and then all the kids had to do was attach them together with a mouse and put in what we would call parameters today, but pieces of information. How long do I want it to run? Do I want it to go up or down? Do I want it to go left or right? Turn this wheel, turn that wheel. And it was amazing how quickly these young kids picked this up, and we're having these robots do pretty complex things. Well, when I started looking at Microsoft Flow, it occurred to me that Microsoft basically went through the same thing. They stepped back and they said, look, everybody wants automation. Everybody wants to, when I do something in SharePoint, I'd really like it to automatically notify me. If somebody changes a document in SharePoint, I want it to notify me. But every time I do that, I have to go to my IT group. They have to either give me rights to do that, or they have to talk to, somebody inside the SharePoint group has to set up a workflow to take care of that for me. This is silly. Why do I, as a non-programmer, always have to go to somebody else to do this for these relatively simple automation tools? So Microsoft, with their suite of Office products and their suite of business products, said, look, we can integrate all this stuff, but we need a front-end tool that's simple enough for non-programmers to be able to do these things, and, I might add, secure enough that it still respects the security rights that are built into all these other programs. And so basically they created kind of the equivalent of what Lego did. They created what you see on the screen here, which is I've got a starting box and I've got an ending box. In this case, it's saying, look, when something is created in Dropbox, then I want to send an email. And all you have to do in this particular case is give it the credentials to your Dropbox and specify where you're looking, and then give it the credentials once for your Office 365 account for your email, and then just literally choose the things you're seeing on the screen. So choose the file name, choose who you want, that you want to send it to me, and maybe choose these things at the bottom, the file content or the file identifier, and then put in the email address of who needs to be notified if it's somebody more than me. That's it. You don't have to build the software or the program to actually reach out to Dropbox, access their web service, access their security credential system, go through all the programming and the back and forth communication to make it happen. Instead, somebody somewhere wrote that once and published this. And we'll talk a little bit about templates that get published out there in the cloud that you can use free of charge. But these are two objects that are pre-built, and you simply then fill in the parameters that you need to make it happen, and then you turn it on, and that's it. And Microsoft in the background has these flows running at various times at various levels in their Azure environment, up in their cloud, and it just runs. It just runs in the background until you shut it off. It just keeps running, and it does what you need it to do. And you can build flows for temporary use. You can build them for permanent use. It doesn't matter because they're yours and you have complete control over them. Things that the flows allow you to do at a very high level is a simple one, notifications. Hey, maybe I want to be pinged on my phone when a certain file gets, or a certain area in SharePoint gets updated, because I know those are approvals for me and I want to see it. And in SharePoint, I actually don't have a workflow turned on for that. Okay, you can set that one up just through some simple automation. Get automatic emails. Maybe I want my Google and my Outlook calendar to constantly sync. So, if I add something to my Google calendar, I want it to show up on my Outlook calendar. And we'll actually see that flow happen today. I can synchronize files, so if I drop something in OneDrive, I want it to hop over in a certain folder. I want it to hop over into Dropbox for me. I can create approval automations, and we'll talk a little bit about Navision and the flows that they're setting up for Navision. And I can also collect data. And I'll tell you a story about one when we start looking at the flows, but I can have it go out and look at other common data models. I can have it look at external databases that are not in Azure, they're not Microsoft based. I can look at all kinds of social media, and I can watch for key pieces of information, and then have that flow automatically collect it and either dump it into a spreadsheet or dump it into a database, and then I can work from that for my reporting purposes or do my analysis or whatever I need to do with it. So from Microsoft's standpoint, again, they wanted to make this as simple as they could for people. And so what they did was they said, look, people, when you start building things, make a template, and if you're willing, make them public so that your work, in the back end to build these can be utilized by hundreds of thousands of other people for the same thing. So at some point, somebody made one that said, watch SharePoint, and when I do it, do an email. So you can build a flow right off that template. You don't have to choose the blocks or the objects. You don't have to do any of that. You can click on that, fill in some pertinent pieces of information, and you're done. And there are literally hundreds and thousands of these templates out there for you to get better. We talked about synchronizing a Google Calendar and an Outlook calendar. You'll notice that right down on the lower list, about the third one over, there's one of those. The one next to them. When I do something in email, I want it to pop over to Wunderlist too. That's a listing program that Microsoft has nothing to do with, but somebody's written, the integration for that, and now you get all the benefits of that particular game. So Microsoft was smart enough to go, look, if we're only going to do Microsoft stuff, this isn't going to succeed. So we want to link to all kinds of stuff. So you can see here that they've already built into the ecosystem that is Flow. They're connecting to all kinds of things: Box, Dropbox, Salesforce.com, Google Drive, OneDrive for Business, Dynamics CRM Online, MailChimp, obviously Office 365. They link to Twitter, they link to Facebook, Yammer, Wunderlist. I mean, these are all pre-built connectors that really all you have to do when you use them is say, here's my credentials, here's my user ID and my password, boom, I'm in, everybody's happy, we authenticate well, and we go on from there. They've really made an effort to do that. On top of that, you get a lot of people adding to these on a daily basis. So as this grows, you're going to find more and more connections out there. You can write your own, and they're called a Power App. We're not going to go into that today. But a Power App is designed to say, I'm going to do all the heavy lifting for you, and you end up with one of these connectors from that. One of the ones that people get a little confused on, but it's important, is the Common Data Model. And that's on the top list, about the fifth one over to the right. That is a couple of different ways. One is you can actually have a data model, a database in Azure or somewhere else, and you're pumping data into it and pulling data out of it from different sources. So if I have a database that is for a certain business application and it's sitting off in somebody else's sets of servers, but I have rights to get in and pull data, maybe I can just read, I can't write. Well, I can write a flow to do that automatically, and I work from a common data model to make that happen. So there are expansive benefits to this for getting outside your own business structure and really being able to work with this. For anybody that's on the call and is using Navision or Dynamics 365, they have released a beta version of this, and they are soon going to release the final version of the connectors for both NAV 2017 and for Dynamics 365. This is, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the very end, but this is an add-on and an augment to workflows that are built into these programs on their own. And I'm going to just kind of say that and hold until we get a little further down the pike on this call, because it'll become a little more clear after that. As I said, they're in the beta right now, so they can be a little flaky at times, but they are functional. So, just a real quick kind of glance at a screenshot here. When you have flows, you can build as many as you want for yourself. And again, they sit back there, and if they're turned on in that middle column there, it says on and off, they can just run. And in the middle, where it says the time, it tells you when the last time was you updated that. And we're going to look at all this stuff. But these are some of them that I was just playing with and created during the election time. I'll tell you, you got to be careful on some of the flows you built. I randomly picked that, I wanted to watch Hillary's Twitter feed, and said every time I saw the word Hillary, automatically send me an email. And when I turned it on, in about 1 minute, I had 875 emails. So, I immediately obviously turned it off. But those are the kinds of things, and we talked about watching social media and other issues. Those are the kinds of things that you can set up for these flows. And imagine if you're selling into the consumer market and you've got a couple of different Twitter feeds out there that you want to monitor. A flow can watch for terms. You can tell it, I want to watch for these words or these phrases, or maybe I want to watch for likes and dislikes. I want to, whatever that is, and then accumulate that and not send yourself an email, but push it over into a data table so that you can start doing some analysis on, am I seeing a positive trend or a negative trend? And that's, again, no programmer's setting this up. This is you setting it up for yourself. You're a marketing person, you can set this up to do anything you want. So, again, this is just a screenshot of what your screen looks like, and we'll get into it in the demo. But you can obviously edit them, delete them, or that little hourglass at the end, the little clock at the end of the line, that can tell you when the last time the flow ran, was it successful or not. So with that being said, let's hop over into the demos. And the first thing I'll tell you is, you're going to work from Microsoft Office 365, and you'll have a tile here that's flow. This is included with your Office 365 subscription. So when you go into flow, there's a column or menu options up here for what you want to see. You click on My Flows, and it's going to bring these flows up for you. Now, we'll look at the Google Calendar sync. So if I want to see the last time it ran, well, it didn't run recently, so we'll pull back from that one. We can look at the flow itself, and then we're going to actually run this. But basically, here's what it takes. This is a Google object right here. And it's saying, look, what do I want to do? Well, I've already told Flow that my sign-on for Google is arwine@gmail.com and my password. And I wanted to watch that calendar. So from this perspective, it has all my information. And then I took the Office Outlook object and I said, I want to create an event. I want to create a calendar event. I want to add the end time and the start time, give me the subject and the event ID. And I have a whole lot of other information I could fill in. I want to see the description, maybe the location. I can look at all this information and fill in whatever I want to fill in from here. And then I can actually look at my credentials if I want to. If there was something else I wanted to do, I'd click on Next Step and do that, add it on. But you'll notice, basically, here's the flow. Read my calendar, do an update. And you'll see the arrow here that's telling you what it really needs to do. If I had made changes, I would update here. In this case, I'm just going to close it. And I'm going to go to my Google Calendar. And I'm going to go ahead and tell it, look, I want to add something. So we're going to test moving calendar flow. And I'm going to save that. So it's on Friday, and it's at roughly 8:30, it looks like. So if I look at my calendar over here now, at some point shortly, what you're going to see is it's going to appear. Now, what I want to tell people about is the appearance of these things and when the flows fire off is up to Microsoft, but it does happen on a fairly frequent and regular basis. And you'll notice it just appeared. I didn't do that on purpose. Normally it's pretty stinking quick. This time it just took a few seconds. But that was Microsoft in the background running the flow for you. I've just got it turned on. That's it. That's the only thing I'm doing. Microsoft is handling the actual initiation and execution of the flow. So there's my calendar. There it is. I can also have a flow that deletes them. I could have a flow that allows for the edit. I could create a master flow that handles all three of those if I wanted to. Again, we're dealing with a real simple example here, so I don't want to get too crazy and complex in it. But that was all it did. And if I look in here, it's telling me, look, 51 seconds, 1 second was the duration, and it succeeded. Let's take a look at that. So when I go into this, now I can actually look at the details of what happened. So from my calendar, I had this title, these times, a bunch of other information that you don't really care about, but then I can go and see what happened at this end. What's the subject on the calendar? What are my times? There's a whole bunch of information that's in the background. Again, you don't necessarily care about that, but it certainly allows you to see this. The other important point of this is when you get a failure, and you will occasionally, you can come in here and maybe you got a green check mark here, but you got a red X here. You can go down and it will tell you what failed and why. So let's say you're attaching to a database and you're pulling records in, but in your conditions, maybe you just got some bad data in there and the system can't figure out what it is. It'll show you the record and it'll show you the bad data and tell you it's incomprehensible or it's broken or there's bad structure to the data. Unfortunately, they're not great with their terms and explanations, but at least it gives you the ability to see what happened and why it happened. So let's look at a couple of others. You'll notice I'm just going back to my flows. SharePoint. And again, pretty simple. When I get a modification to a file in SharePoint under this folder, I want to send myself an email. So let's go in there. And I'm going to go into Jeff's flow here, or a file I've got there. And I'm going to edit it. And we'll say again for webinar. And I'll save it. So we got what we want there. Go back to the base so we can actually see it made it through there. And I've probably got this one blocked, but I want it to send an email when it does that. It's going to send it to awind@innovia.com. So we'll let that one kind of sit for a while because it may take a minute since I was running that, and I may actually have to do it one more time. But the idea is that we get an update, an email from SharePoint telling us, hey, this file was modified. Now, here's the thing. If you take this to your IT group, they'll go, well, we can do that automatically through workflows in SharePoint. Yes, I understand that. But you have to take it to the SharePoint guys to do that. Or you have to have rights to be able to do that. In this case, I don't have to do anything inside SharePoint other than modify the file like I would normally do. Microsoft Flow is making all the connections and working. So it really augments what you can do, and it allows you to take charge of those things that you really want to see updates on. You don't care about the rest of the world, but maybe you do care about that one. Let's do a Dropbox one. So I'm going to go into my my stuff here. I'm going to take, let's see, what do I want to take? Something not massive. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to copy it into my Dropbox. So if I look at my Dropbox, 11.8, just got one in there. No, let's see, what did I move? Yeah, it should be in there now. So, if we come back here, hang on just a second. Sorry about popping around on you guys. So there's my open ticket to Dropbox. And you'll notice it says open tickets file was created. If I click on it, there it is. This is all, again, done through Microsoft Flow. It was not done through automation of Dropbox or automation of Outlook or any of those things. It was done here. How did we do that? Well, if I go in and edit it, again, it's 2 objects were all I needed to do this. I've already given it my credentials. These are my credentials. Oops, sorry. So when I built this the first time, I told it my credentials. And then I'm telling it where to send the information. That's it. Simple and clean and complete. There isn't anything complicated about that. And so if you start thinking about, hey, you know, I've got people that are sending me information in Dropbox because, all right, this email we just got there, just so we can hop over and I can prove I'm not lying. This was my SharePoint one. So this was the change I made to SharePoint. If I'm in marketing, you know, I use marketing a lot for something like Dropbox because it's got huge files frequently. Maybe I want a flow that says, look, when I get something into Dropbox that automatically, you know, that's from a certain email account, I want to see an email or I want to see a notification of some kind that tells me something arrived. Then I don't have to worry about it. Are there other ways to do that? Sure. But does this give you the maximum control? Yeah. The other nice thing is you can say, okay, I've set this up one time because I want to watch for something to show up and I don't want to keep watching my Dropbox. Once I get it, I'm done. And I can even go in and delete it. Maybe I just needed it for a week. Once I got it there, I don't care about it anymore. So there are ways to make a whole bunch of little flows from that perspective. Let's look at this one. So when I get an email into my account, and it's from my Gmail account, then I want it to, on groceries, my groceries ID and the Wonder List, I want it to send the subject of it. So we'll go and look at, let me send one in real quick. And this one sometimes takes a little bit to notify it, but we can just give it a shot. So now I've sent an email from my Gmail account to myself. I just got the email. If I go into Wunderlist, now this is not synced yet, and this one can take up to, and I've been noticing about 5 minutes or so. But eventually, it will show up here, and you'll notice it's telling me the email is coming. Oh, there we go. So this just came in, and I just got it from that standpoint, and it brought in the information that I wanted to send. I actually have another flow running at the same time that pushes to groceries also, so I actually got 2 updates from this. And let's look at that conditional flow. And that's the last thing I want to show you on the demos, other than we'll take a quick look at how to build it from scratch. The other thing that you can do in Flow is have what are called conditionals. So here's my flow for kind of watching emails and deciding what I want to do with them. And yes, if you understand Exchange and rules and Outlook, you can do all this that way too, but here's a little bit more expansive capability. I want it to watch my inbox, and that's all I want it to do. When emails come in, I want it to do it. But then I'm going to evaluate them. So I have a condition here, and it says, look, where it's coming from, if it's equal to my Gmail account, then I want it to create a list. And if you'll notice, back here on Wunderlist, I got it, right? I got test and I got these. So I got 2 of them. If you were wondering why, here's the second one. You know, here's that very first one. Who's it from and what's the subject? If it's from other people, if it's from somebody that is not from AR Wine, but it is not from inside my company, so I don't want this dealing with anybody from Innovia, then you know what? I want you to do another thing, which is in my private Wunderlist, I want you to say from and subject. If it's from Innovia, don't do anything, because I'm going to see those in my email account. And I'll show you that I've been playing with this, and as we've been talking, I've actually gotten some other emails. Transit, Yammer, GoToWebinar, Bulldog Battery, a variety of different things here. And these have just been accumulating. So you can set up conditional information and conditional choices to help you kind of really drill in and get very specific information, especially if you have to do a variety of different tasks. And you simply add those actions or add these conditions by doing it here. And we're going to actually walk through a simple one and we'll set it up. But that is the basics of what we're doing here. If I come back a little bit. So in my conditions here, I can say, look, again, it's a simple yes and no. So let's step back. Let's close this. And let's talk about how you create these. So we showed that I could link to Google, I could link to SharePoint, Dropbox, Wunderlist. Again, none of those are inside my environment. None of them actually, quite frankly, are Office 365 or Microsoft items. SharePoint is, and I've got conditions. If I want to build a flow, I can create it from blank or I can create it from a template. Let's take a look at a template real quick. Now we're back to that slide I showed you about people creating templates for you and how you want to, and then you just being able to use them so you don't have to choose these objects. And there's all kinds of them, and you can filter on them by what you want to see, mobile, email, collect data, and you can see it here. I can also kind of go, okay, what are my most popular ones? I can do a search to say, hey, I want to see stuff for Dropbox. And then it just starts bringing me up all the Dropbox ones. What else have we got? So, here's, let's pick a relatively simple one. Let's go back here. Clear this. Let me hop back one page. There we go. So I'm looking for something that's not going to be super complicated. Here, we'll do the calendar again just because you've already seen that once, and I think it'll be a little bit. But if I wanted to do the calendar, I could click on this, and it says, okay, look, here's what you're going to do. You're going to be taking your information from Calendar, Google, and putting it in Outlook, right? Yes. This is what's going to happen. So you want to use this template? Yeah, I do. So I click on this. Now, the very first time you use one of these templates, so this is actually going to Outlook.com, it's going to say, hey, I need some critical information. Once I give it my login information for this, it'll keep it. If I want to do an update to this, then what I can do is say, no, I'm not going to use those. I'm going to add a new connection here, so I got to make them do the same thing, and I don't have my Outlook. The reason I'm not using my Outlook, folks, is because I don't have it set up properly. Normally, I could go in here and actually tell it, ARY@outlook.com with a new value. I'm going to back up from this one, but once I set that, then I'd be ready to go. Let me actually back up here and see what I can find. A little bit better, cleaner one. If I don't see the one I want right off the top of my head, I don't want to tie us up looking, so I'm going to back off this. Let's go back to our flows. We'll create it from blank. So I want to see a Google Calendar. So when an event's added to a calendar, again, it's already got my ID. My next step, I'm going to add an action. In this case, Office 365, Outlook, Calendar. I'm going to create an event. And now here's my same information. It's already got my login information because I did it the first time. If I hadn't done it the first time, I could have put my connection information in here. Then I can, because it knows who I am, it knows what I've got out there for calendars. Now, when I click here, it says, okay, these are pieces of information that I can get out of Google. So what do you want? Well, in the end time, you know what? I want end time. Start time, I want start time too. Subject, I'm going to use title. And I can just work my way down. But you'll notice I'm not having to do any heavy lifting here. I'm not actually having to go in and tell it from the web service, here's the data type and the data field that I want. they've given it to me in nice functionality here. And if I'm done, then I'm done, and I can create the flow. I'm not going to create this particular one, but you would put a new name on it. Webinar flow. I'll just go ahead and create it. It should be quick. If I didn't do anything wrong, I should see it. So we'll be done. Go back to my flows, and there's my webinar flow. I'm going to turn it off. If I wanted to edit it, I can go back in, do my edits here, add additional steps. Maybe I want to watch calendar updates for certain types of information. You can get into the actual code of the flow itself, the back end. I recommend you don't, and I recommend you never do it unless you really understand the programming languages, because that's the best way to screw up a flow, is to stop using the objects and go in and actually use the code. But again, what I hope you see is this is pretty simple in terms of point and click, and that's the idea behind it. The best thing too is once you log into one of your services, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, OneDrive, Outlook, doesn't matter, it maintains that, because this is your account. Everything we see here is for you. So it knows those credentials, and unless you change them, like you noticed that it was honking at me for Outlook. Well, I know what it is. I changed my password a while back. It was giving me a problem, and that's just an account I have set up for demoing, and frankly forgot I was using it. That's the process. So it's going to tell you need to fix that, because I can't move forward on this. So let's go back. There we go. So the flow's job, again, is to give you the tools to be able to do, for all practical purposes, relatively simple automation, but you can get some fairly complex stuff. And for those of you that use Navision, you know that there is a workflow behind the scenes that you can set up. But if you've ever set one of those up, you also know that there's a level of complexity to it in terms of getting your stages right, and you have to run it on a job queue. So inside Nav, back on your servers, you have to have a job queue running those flows. It allows you to do approvals. It allows you to do a number of things. I'm not saying it's not a strong program. It is. It's very good, and quite frankly, if you're doing something heavy lifting like approvals, if you're doing multi-analysis on purchasing, well, this guy, if it's under 50,000, he can approve it himself. But if it's over 50,000, it has to go through these stages. When I get an accounts payable in, if it's past a certain date, I want it to get sent to somebody else. Those are all kinds of workflows that you would build into Nav, because that's what workflow is designed for in Navision. And there's several pre-built ones to do that for you. Microsoft Flow's job, remember, is to say, okay, I got this automation tool. I'm going to connect to various data pieces and do something with it. I don't have to set a server up to run those jobs, because Microsoft is doing it in his Azure cloud. I only need an Office 365 account to do this. So, while I have to pay for the Office 365 account, it's a relatively inexpensive product. And if you're already running, hosted Exchange and Office 365, it's built in. It's free. You don't need anything. Your credentials, your personal credentials for these things, are what it uses for the data objects. And best, from my perspective, for business automation, is that it allows me to safely connect to outside data sources without the danger of opening pipes through my firewall and causing problems. I'm getting this information. Microsoft's handling all of that. I'm just benefiting from, from their ability to set up this structure behind the scenes. So for things like, and I kind of like the calendar app, because in some cases, let's say you're a job shop, maybe you've got job-specific software, and it's running on calendars. You've got calendars for scheduling people to go out to do those jobs. But you would also like somebody who's maybe their Google, you don't give them rights to anything, but you'd like to use their Google Calendar to tell them when they need to be on a specific job site and how long we think it's going to happen. you can set a flow up to do that. You reach out to the calendar inside the application that is specific for doing jobs, pull that new event, and plop it into a Google Calendar for these guys. Now they're on their phone, they're out on the road, they can see that they've got a new entry, and everybody's happy. Everything's running fine, but nobody has to worry about opening up pipes, other security, buying other users to do that. So there's ways to take advantage of this to save you money and improve on your automation. So here's the critical information for getting out there. Go to flowmicrosoft.com, flow.microsoft.com. You can sign up there for Flow if you need to, if it's not already on your Office 365. Again, well, I showed you at the beginning, it's just a tile. We'll show that again. There's some really good blogs out there in that same website, and I would highly recommend that as you get started, you read some of those blogs, because it's people who are saying, hey, when I just started, I ran into this problem, and I found out it was because I didn't have my credentials right, or I found out it was because I was trying to take a piece of information, put it in a data field that the two are just fundamentally incompatible. Maybe I was using a date field, trying to put it in text, and eventually the template just blew up and didn't like it. Those are helpful. Pre-built templates. I can't tell and stress enough how beneficial those are for learning how to do these flows, because they've done a lot of the heavy lifting. You're basically just filling out information at that point. You're not saying, I need this object and this object and that object. You've got the pre-built ones there to teach you how to build them from scratch later on. So really take advantage of the pre-built templates. This is my connection information, so feel free to email me any questions you may have. I'm certainly not what I would call an expert on this, but I've been playing with it quite a while now and enjoying it. And we'll open this up for any questions that Abby may have gotten in her question box.
Thanks, Alan. We do have a couple of questions. Here's the first one. Is there a cost for Microsoft Flow?
So there's not at this point. If you have an Office 365 account, it will give you automatically Flow. And let me get to the right spot here. Where am I at? Oh, there we go. So if you've got an Office 365 account, you can sign up for Flow, and then it'll happen automatically.
Okay, great. Our next question, can you link to any external database?
So not completely, and I'm going to qualify that. Somebody has to once have written those objects into the database. So we talked about when you are in templates, somebody's written the Power app to do this, to link to to link to Outlook, to link to Office 365, to link to SharePoint. They've done that one time. Now they've got them. So when you start looking at when you start looking at these objects, somebody has created these things. Now, more and more people are creating more and more objects. The external database has to have either an API or a web service or something that allows you to link into it and pull the information back. But once that's done and people publish them out here, then you should be good to go. Or you can write your own. If you're qualified, you can certainly write the Power app to do it.
Okay, and our final question, when will it be ready for nav?
Well, technically it's ready now. I would say that it is in a beta stage at this point. I've had decent success is probably the best way to phrase it. I'd give it a few more months. It's okay with the Dynamics 365. There's still a few quirks, but it's okay with Dynamics 365. Nav 2017, they're getting there. So within probably 3 to 4 months, my guess is the connector will be stable, will work pretty well, and then you'll start seeing a lot of pre-built templates out there for things like, hey, when I get a new customer record, can I send it to this guy? When I get, a vendor approval, when I get a manufacturing order for these products, I'd like to update the salesman so he knows they're started manufacturing on them. You're going to start seeing a lot of those that people want to do, but they don't want to go through NAV's workflow to do that. So it certainly will. It'll start as a trickle, and then it'll end up being a relative deluge out onto it. Okay?
Well, Alan, thank you so much. And of course, all of our attendees, thank you for attending today. As a reminder, we'll have the recording of our webinar up on our website by the end of the day. Of course, that's Innovia.com. And we hope you all can join us for our next webinar.
Thank you, folks.